Thank you so much, Paul. I was at one of these maybe a year ago in the audience, so it's really cool to be here. I loved it when I was a participant. So yeah, get thinking of what talk you can do at the next one. Let me just get these. So today I'm talking about retention, and in the next 10 minutes, we're going to go through diagnosing what the issues are, how can you intervene, and then how do you iterate a process to work on retention, because it's super, super tricky. I'll do intros, and then I've got a framework called the 3 rungs of retention, starting with the more strategic part of it. So the core value, the core existential question of, does your product provide value? The second rung is around triggers and touch points. It's more tactical. And then the last one is around personalization and how you make sure you're listening to customers in a way where you can iterate on things. First of all, I'm Rosie. I am growth lead at Fyxer. As Paul said, there are no PMs at Fyxer, and we've just hired our first designer. So yeah, my role is across the full funnel. I play a product role. I also work on things like product-led sales. I love the whole funnel, essentially, and I've been thinking about retention a lot recently. I also write at growthdives.com. I'm relatively new in my role. I was freelance for a couple of years beforehand. I started in B2C SaaS, then moved into B2B more recently. And yeah, I'm loving it so far. So the reason why I wanted to talk about retention is, in my view, it is the one hardest metric to move. I don't know if anyone else feels the same. I think there's a couple of reasons why this is the case. The first one is it's obviously a lagging metric. So it's often hiding things like, is your onboarding good enough? Do people adopt your features? Is there something upper funnel? And so something can appear in retention much later. And when you realize, you try and untangle it, there's like multiple things. People are like, what happened on Tuesday, like 4 months ago? What did you release? Who launched this ad? And everyone's like, ah. So it's super messy, but like more than that, it's actually really scary. I have been in 2 businesses that are like older, I would say older, but like 4 or 5 years old. I'm staring at some charts, and retention is like 12% in month 2, or it's like 20%. And I'm staring, and I think there's a core problem here. And I think the thing is, retention is that quantitative metric that is very close to product market fit. So if you have really low retention, it's often a signal that there's something in the core value of the product that's not quite there. And what I've done in the past is like, hey, talk to the founder, talk to whoever. Look, it might be a product market fit issue. It's like, let's look into this. And it's often met with silence or kind of, sure. And I feel like there's this fear that poor retention means like a product market fit, and we'll just hide that under the rug until later. But actually, it's about, as product people, having a framework to take people through that's not scary and not existential. So yeah, when I brought up product market fit issues previously, some didn't go so well. So I've learned now, like, what's the framework that we need to bring to people that actually helps them work through it. So I'm going to talk through the 3 rungs of retention, starting from the bottom because it's a ladder. The first one is core product. What is your core product value, and how does that relate to retention? That's the more strategic piece of what do we need to build. Is the product roadmap actually going to move retention? The second one is around tactical things, touch points, triggers. Are you physically there in the journey when they might churn? And then the last one is around customer feedback. So first one, starting at the bottom of the ladder before we climb to the top of the ladder. And I thought about this on Saturday or Sunday as a visual. So let me know later if you think it works. So first, who's heard of the product market fit survey? Or sometimes it's called the somewhat disappointed survey. Hands up if you've heard of it. Some people. So essentially, it's a survey which gives you a qualitative metric as to whether you have product market fit. The key question is, how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use this product? Very disappointed are your power users. Somewhat disappointed are people who are on the fence. And not disappointed are people who are not going to love your product. And the reason I love this is because it's a qualitative metric and it's very simple. A lot of the time it correlates to retention. So the product market fit metric is 40% of your customers should be very disappointed if they could no longer use you. The reason I love this is not necessarily that, it's because it makes it slightly easier to be a bit ruthless about who you listen to. So classically, you might have had this thing where people are like, oh, we want this feature, and you build it and nothing happens. What happens there is you might be listening to power users. Power users might already be using you, loving you, paying you. Therefore, if you improve things for them, you might not move the metrics. You also don't want to be listening to the poorer quality users, I would call them, people who aren't your target customer. Those are the people who are the very disappointed users. And essentially what this allows you to do is just cut out the power users and cut out the bottom as well. And what that leaves you is the people on the fence. And you want to know, like, why are these people on the fence? Why aren't these people power users? What's stopping them from loving the product? And when you put on a matrix like this, what theoretically will improve retention, and I've done this exercise before when I was freelance across a couple of businesses, and it's really helpful for like cutting out things on a product roadmap that aren't actually going to move the needle. And it's actually worked a couple of times. And so it's a case of saying, all right, who do we listen to? What are the 3 biggest themes of those people? If we solve these themes, we should push those on the fence users, the somewhat disappointed, into the power user bucket. And so this is the first thing I always think about with retention. Is there a core problem? Not telling the founder that you don't have product market fit, because that doesn't go so well, but more giving them a framework of like, hey, we need to get this very disappointed cohort into 40%. Like, you know, there's 3 big themes. We've heard these a lot. Like, how can we solve these? And so I find this a really useful way to kind of narrow down a product roadmap, which isn't so scary. The second rung, so we're climbing up the ladder. This is around tactics, touch point and triggers. So this is the thing where like the founder might tag you on a Substack, have we tried this thing? Or like email you a newsletter and be like, have we tried all these tactics? So these are things that like, what can you actually do? These are not like big product features. This is more like the touch points on the triggers where you need to be present. The key thing here is if you don't ask and if you're not present at certain parts of the customer journey, you don't get. So on this very simplified arrow, I've got sign up, or the first time someone discovers your product. Then we've got activation, like how do you get people to the core moment, and then the negative, the churn, the moment they leave you. To simplify it, like where do you work? There's often a lot of low-hanging fruit at the end, like the bad moments, the moments where like they leave checkout, they cancel, like very easy, low stakeholder involvement. Like we need to be there when people churn. We need to work on our kind of cancellation flow or our abandoned cart flow. What do we do on day 1 since they cancel day 2, day 3, day 5? And there's lots of low-hanging fruit here. There's often a lot of easy, quick wins where generally if you don't ask, you don't get. Like if you don't ask for feedback or if you don't ask people to stay, they're never going to stay. So you just want to be there, be present. This is more around the UX. Like when people are going through something, are you there? Very simple. Retention issues are often masking activation issues. So the next thing I do is look at activation. So like how many people who come in are actually getting to the core value. And it's another, with your retention chart, the kind of flat lines, a lot of the time if you take away the people who don't activate, you can see actually you've got a massive activation problem. And so this is a bit tricky. Obviously it's around onboarding, early experience, but that's like the next easiest place to work. The last one is pre-churn indicators. And you don't have to have a snazzy data science team. This is basically what, if users do or don't do, will make them leave. And you don't need to be blocked by not having some sort of fancy retention leading indicator correlation analysis data science model. It's more like brainstorming, right? We need to get these people to these 3 actions. This group of people haven't done those actions. What do we do about it? And like A/B testing that to see if you can actually push retention later than layering on advanced data stuff if you want. The last rung, we're at the top, sorry for the people who are scared of heights, is around customer feedback. So what I find with any sort of like UX or journey stuff, I think a lot of stakeholders like, we need to personalize, we need to have these 7 flows. I'm like, whoa, like let's get the touch points in, let's understand the core value, and then let's make it more complicated. Because I think a lot of the time, if you've got personalization, you've got like 10 different flows, you build a lot of tech debt, design debt, analytics debt, all the debt, where you actually don't learn anything from personalization. So the key thing here is when you've got your touch points in, you've understood what bits of the product roadmap might actually drive retention. It's a case of saying, right, now let's listen to people really closely and see why they're churning. Not all offers are equal. I've actually done an A/B test where offered a discount and then offered something else, and there was no statistical difference. And for that, it's like, okay, discounts don't always work. Like if someone didn't churn because you were too expensive, then a discount might not work. if they want to churn or they're going to churn because they had a technical issue, what do you need to provide for them? Maybe it's a one-on-one chat with technical support. Maybe it's a change log of all the launches, or saying, hey, in the past 2 weeks, we've launched 5 updates. You told us like things were really slow. We've improved that. So it's a case of like really understanding the reasons why people aren't retaining, meeting people where they're at in terms of touch points, but then also meeting them where they're at in terms of messaging and what you can give them to solve that. Support is another one, like, oh, I can contact support. It's like, hey, happy to help you, get on a one-on-one call. So this is more around keep it simple first, then break it down by the big reasons for churn. And once you start chipping away at these systematically and A/B testing where the personalization works. I've actually got a holdout test on at the moment where there's like a really complex, like eight message flow for like the reason you churned and giving you something really specific for each. And then 5% of people who go down like a really simple, hey, come back type thing. So it's interesting to see if the personalization will work. But it's a case of like slowly chipping away, keeping it simple, and then complicating it later. So in summary, in the 10 minutes, I've got 7 seconds, there's a timer here. Start with the core product value. Try not to scare the founders. You want to look at the people who are on the fence and ignore everyone else. Don't be apologetic about it. Then move to the obvious UX things, the touch points. Are you there? Do you ask? Are you present? Then activation, like are people stuck at the beginning of the funnel and it's hurting the end of the funnel? Brainstorming some pre-churn indicators, trying to intervene. Like you don't necessarily need someone to cancel or exit a flow before you know whether they're going to do that. Just think slightly further up the funnel. And then listening to churn feedback, tailoring the offer. And the last one is around automating calls as much as possible. So like if you've got a churn flow, if you've got a UI somewhere, if you've got cancellation, can you get like a little call in there? So you just get like retention calls in the diary, like every week, every month. Like in my first couple of weeks at Fyxer, I was on like 5 churn calls because I was like, can you just put a Calendly in there and then talk to very unhappy people? So it's just a really good way to get a bit closer to the people who are dropping off. And I think retention doesn't have to be so scary. We can like break it down for stakeholders. So we can go strategic, tactical, and ultimately we can get through the messiness that is retention. So thank you.